en route back from the moon. It's just the way orbital mechanics works, that sets the course and the velocity and the entrapment of integrity into the grip of Earth's gravity that dictates all of that. But again, we're about a little over an hour and a half away from reaching the halfway point back from the moon for the splashdown in the Pacific tomorrow night. Again, ongoing discussions between Jeremy Hansen and Capcom Jackie Mahaffey here in Mission Control as the crew packs up from a Lunar camping trip. This is very much akin to what you would do after a camping trip or a holiday vacation. There was no holiday involved here. It was simply an historic flyby of the moon that occurred several days ago. Once again, we're about 30 minutes out from our final public affairs event of this mission, a conversation between members of Congress and the crew aboard Integrity as we approach the halfway mark of their trip home back to Earth from the moon.
Wireless mic, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off.
Copy, blast off. Good scene and voice. We'll be ready on time.
And we have the camera off just to prevent overheating and battery drain. Confirm you got a good image coming down.
We do have an image coming down.
You know, Jackie, snark does carry you across the cosmos.
That delayed smile made me feel very good.
Good evening, Artemis II Crew. As you all approach your final day on this historic journey around the moon, the people of Earth remain inspired by your mission. They are energized by space exploration, and most importantly, they're eager to have you all home very soon. Now, NASA couldn't execute on our important mission without the steadfast support we received from the United States Congress. We work with the agency to make sure it has the right direction to expand American leadership in space and the necessary resources to execute on our world-changing mission. Now, we have several NASA congressional supporters online today, and they have a few questions they'd like to ask you on behalf of their constituents across the country.
I can only imagine the awe and wonderment you feel, but I want to just start by saying thank you. You are inspiring. That is not hyperbole when Jared speaks about the people of Earth. Across the planet, people are watching you and amazed, watching you put food packets away, as we were doing just a few minutes ago, watching you float around with the floating head, and you are bringing people together all across our globe. So thank you. Thank you for your good cheer. Thank you for your eloquence. Thank you for inspiring people. I have two questions. Number one, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself at age 10, what would you tell yourself about going to the moon? And then question two, if and when they make a movie about this, who do you want to play you?
Well, sir, it's an honor to be with all of you, and please say hello to all of our colleagues there at Johnson Space Center. We can't wait to be back. My 10-year-old self, I recently found some photos of myself on a family vacation at Kennedy Space Center, and we were posing in front of the Saturn V rocket with my siblings and my parents. And if I could have told that little girl who took home a picture of Earthrise and hung it in her room that she would eventually launch from that same place to see that same view, I'm pretty sure she would not believe it. But even though I still can't believe it, and she certainly wouldn't believe it, she chased that dream, and it ended up happening. It's such an honor to hear that we've inspired. That's truly one of the top things that we ever wanted to do. And I am definitely not answering the movie question. That's going to be for Reid.
Senator Cruz, it's great to talk to you, and thank you for visiting our friends and family there at the Johnson Space Center. That is fantastic. we've thought a little bit about the movie, and I think that's way out of our pay grade. So we don't know who's going to play us. That's up to whoever decides. But one thing we do know for certain is this guy is going to be played by Buzz Lightyear, 100%, no doubt.
I have a question from one of our local voters here in Indian River County. Her name is Renee, and she said, "What were you thinking when you were going around the moon, the furthest ever from Earth on the dark side of the moon?" We'd love to hear your thoughts as you made your way around the moon out of radio contact.
So during the time of the nearest approach to the moon, we were doing so much science. I took a brief moment to say a short prayer of gratitude for being sent on this mission and trusted with, bringing back scientifically relevant information. And I also just felt like I was hoping that people looked up and were watching to see when we came back into communication, and that maybe there was a chance that folks would feel a sense of togetherness. We have a moment of silence whenever something solemn and that requires reverence or someone that we love has passed away, but maybe we could call it a moment of togetherness. As we were in radio silence, I was really hoping that we could just have a sense. You heard the word togetherness a lot from our crew, and really was hoping that while we were waiting to get back in contact, that people could just feel that sense of togetherness, that we were all a crew on Spaceship Earth.
And integrity, just over 10 minutes ago, as you were having that event, you passed the halfway home mark.
Okay, copy that, Jackie. Sounds like the next 24 hours we're gonna accelerate quite a bit then.
Absolutely.
This is Artemis Mission Control in Houston, Texas. The final targeting for the upcoming Return Trajectory Correction burn, or RTC-2 burn, has been completed, and we do expect that RTC burn to take place in about 29 minutes from now. As of right now, it's expected to be a 5.37 foot per second delta velocity burn and approximately a 9-second burn. This will be using the 8 auxiliary pulse-X thrusters on the Orion spacecraft. Here in Mission Control Houston, the team on console is currently conducting their go, no-go poll for that upcoming Return Trajectory Correction burn. And again, this burn will further fine-tune the trajectory and the path of the Orion spacecraft as it makes its final approach ahead of that Reentry and Splashdown targeted for Friday, April 10th.
Integrity Houston, tank pressures are good for the burn.
Integrity copies.
Integrity Houston, maneuver to burn attitude starting in approximately 3 minutes.
We're expecting the same. Thanks, Amy.
This is Artemis Mission Control in Houston, Texas. We are currently about 10 minutes away from the start of the Return Trajectory Correction 2 burn, or RTC-2. This is expected to be about a 9.41 second burn with an expected delta velocity change of 5.37 feet per second, using the 8 pulse-X thrusters on the Orion spacecraft to further fine-tune the trajectory of the Orion spacecraft on its path back towards Earth. Currently on your screen, you can see a view of the Artemis Real-Time Orbit website, or ARO. The Orion spacecraft is currently traveling at a velocity of about 3,400 miles per hour, and it is about 114,000 miles away from Earth. Earlier today, it did pass the halfway point of its return back to Earth. Again, it is expected to splash down off the coast of San Diego, California on Friday, April 10th around 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time. In just a few moments, we should hear confirmation called up to the crew that Orion is in burn attitude. The Orion spacecraft is currently maneuvering to that burn attitude.
Integrity Houston, Integrity is in burn attitude.
Artemis Mission Control in Houston, Texas. We are now just under 30 seconds away from the time of ignition of that upcoming Return Trajectory Correction burn, which will be the start of that burn. Again, it is expected to be about a 9.41 second burn using the 8 auxiliary pulse-X thrusters on the Orion spacecraft's service module to generate a 5.37 foot per second change in delta velocity. And we do have confirmation that the return trajectory correction burn has started, that taking place at 9:53 p.m. Central Time, 10:53 p.m. Eastern Time. And we also now have confirmation that the burn has completed, again, that taking place at 9:53 p.m. Central Time, 10:53 p.m. Eastern Time.
Integrity Houston, good burn. We are assessing the details.
We see the same and copy.
This is Artemis Mission Control in Houston, Texas, and we do have that confirmation that the recent return trajectory correction burn was completed, and it was a good burn. Teams on the ground assessing the details, but it was expected to be a 9.41 second burn for a 5.37 foot per second delta velocity. Again, these return trajectory correction burns help to fine-tune the Orion spacecraft's path as it makes its way back to Earth, and this was the second in a series of 3 return trajectory correction burns, with that first return trajectory correction burn taking place on flight day 7, and the final return trajectory correction burn is expected to take place on flight day 10, about 5 hours prior to entry interface.
Integrity Houston, confirm a good burn, and prop post-burn reconfiguration is complete.
We copy all, and we have a gorgeous view of you out window 2.
Awesome, we're waving at you.
We are too.
On December 19th, 1972, at 2:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Command Module America splashed down to the Pacific with Gene Cernan, Ron Evans, and Jack Schmitt aboard as the Apollo 17 mission came to an end along with humanity's first series of expeditions to the moon. Today, at this hour, 4 astronauts are barreling home for a splashdown in the Pacific to complete a mission of more than 694,000 miles to fly around the moon, setting the stage for future expeditions with a splashdown in the Pacific off the coast of San Diego. Good day from the Artemis Flight Control Room, known as the White Flight Control Room at Mission Control here at the Johnson Space Center at Houston, as we begin our coverage of entry day for the Integrity astronauts, Commander Reid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency. The crew at this hour still asleep. They're scheduled to wake up in about an hour or so at 10:35 a.m. Central Time to begin their final hours on orbit. As you can see from this computer-generated graphic based on real-time telemetry, we are currently just 67,000 miles from the Earth. We have passed that halfway mark last night between the Earth and the Moon, and 186,000 miles from the Moon as we close in on the planet Earth. This view from a solar array wing camera on the Integrity spacecraft showing the Earth. It will grow larger and larger in the field of view as we continue to move throughout the day. Let's talk about a few highlights that lie ahead for Integrity's astronauts. As we mentioned, we will have a shift handover here in Mission Control in an hour, in which the entry team will come on, led by Flight Director Rick Henfling. The Orbit 3 team has been on console throughout the overnight hours, presiding over any minor tweaks to the final hours of the flight plan for Integrity's astronauts. The first big event on the day and on the road home for the astronauts today will be the Return Trajectory Correction 3 burn, the RTC 3 burn. One final opportunity to tweak and fine-tune the path of Integrity toward the entry corridor over the Pacific Ocean, and to put Integrity in the right orientation and the angle of attack to minimize any excessive heating on its heat shield as the astronauts come in to the Earth's atmosphere at some 24,000 miles an hour. That RTC-3 burn is scheduled for 1:53 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. It is forecast by Flight Dynamics to be an 8-second burn that will change the velocity of Integrity by 4.2 feet per second. The crew will be configuring final items in the crew cabin, an opportunity to have a bit of final stowage before they move into their entry checklist, which will include suiting up in their launch and entry suits. Those are the Orion crew survival suits, the OX suits by its acronym. Later this afternoon at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have NASA Plus coverage join as a simulcast to our 24/7 YouTube coverage that we have been providing ever since launch day back on April 1st. NASA Plus coverage again will begin at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. At 6:15 p.m. Central Time, Integrity will do a handover in its communications link from the Deep Space Network to the Tracking and Data Relay satellite system. And at 6:33 p.m. Central Time, the first major milestone will be the separation of the crew module from the European service module. Some 4 minutes later, the crew module will conduct a raise burn, about 19 seconds. We'll see how Flight Dynamics refines that as we get there. Think of it as you sitting in a recliner and tilting back up to a more reclining position. This burn is designed to elevate the aft end of the spacecraft ever so slightly by just a couple of degrees, and that will refine the angle of attack for Integrity as it moves into the Earth's atmosphere and entry interface. That entry interface point at 400,000 feet above the surface of the Earth will be scheduled at 6:53 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time. The peak heating on the spacecraft and the peak velocity on Integrity and its astronauts will come at about 6:54 p.m. when the vehicle will be traveling 23,839 feet per second. That's Mach 32. We will call out the actual numbers of velocity, the Mach numbers, the altitude, the rate of descent in real time as we get telemetry back from Integrity at that point in time. But this is the prediction by Flight Dynamics that our peak velocity will be about 23,839 feet per second, which equates to Mach 32 as Integrity moves into the region of the Earth's atmosphere. We are expecting all of that to happen shortly after a blackout period that will begin at 6:53 and 55 seconds p.m. Central Time. The blackout period to last about 6 minutes in duration. This is at the point in which the heat buildup, the ionization of heat being repelled by the heat shield, will be such that it creates a plasma wake around the vehicle, preventing any communications or data from being received here in Mission Control. So we won't be hearing from the crew for about a 6-minute period. We'll be counting down from that point for you until the time that we reacquire communications with the crew The end of the blackout scheduled just a few seconds before 7 p.m. Central Time. From that point on, we're just 7 minutes from touchdown, initiating a series of roll reversals to bleed off excess energy. Those are computer commanded to roll the vehicle to the left and then gently back to the right, essentially bleeding off excess speed right before the forward bay cover is pulled out by a series of 3 parachutes and then jettisoned. That starts the parachute deployment sequence, 11 parachutes in all, culminating with the deployment of 3 main parachutes. The main chute deploy scheduled at 7:04 and 44 seconds p.m. Central Time, just about 2.5 minutes before splashdown in the Pacific. Splashdown is currently scheduled at 7:07 and 6 seconds p.m. Central Time, 8:07 and 6 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. That will be 5:07 p.m. out in the Pacific, 2.5 hours before sunset. The recovery ship, the John P. Murtha, is on station and will be deploying Navy helicopters, divers, a Navy flight surgeon, other recovery personnel, whose first task will be to erect a large raft alongside of the hatch to integrity. That's called the front porch. Once we have determined that the vehicle is in a safe configuration, and the vehicle will have been powered down just 15 minutes after splashdown. So it will take a few minutes, probably 45 minutes to an hour, to extract the crew and get them on that front porch so they can be harnessed and hoisted onto a pair of Navy helicopters hovering overhead in a sequential fashion, an alternating fashion as well, so that the crew can be flown back a short distance to the deck of the John P. Murtha and then brought into medical bay for comprehensive medical exams and to stay on board the ship for an unprescribed period of time at this point. That will be dependent on their condition post-splashdown. So that's a snapshot as to where we're headed for the rest of the day. We'll carry every minute. We have coverage also on the ship, on the USS John P. Murtha. My colleague Megan Cruz, who is on the ship, she'll be providing reports once we begin our NASA Plus coverage later this afternoon. For the moment, everything is in great shape on board Integrity. No vehicle issues being worked whatsoever. The crew to be awakened just over an hour from now to begin their final hours in space as Integrity sets its sights on the planet Earth and a splashdown in the Pacific at 7:07 p.m. Central Time tonight. For now, this is Mission Control Houston. This is Mission Control Houston. The Orion spacecraft, dubbed Integrity by its crew, is heading home today for a splashdown of the Pacific off the coast of San Diego at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time, 2.5 hours before sunset at the splashdown site. Everything aboard Integrity is in great shape. The crew is to be awakened about 23.5 minutes from now, and will begin at that point to review their morning messages and to complete the configuration of the crew cabin for their high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere this evening and a splashdown under parachutes within sight, hopefully, of the USS John P. Murtha, the recovery ship that will begin the process of extracting the crew, hoisting them on Navy helicopters, and bringing them back to the ship for medical exams before they are brought back to shore in San Diego for a flight back to the Johnson Space Center. Following wake up, we'll get into more details about the timeline and about the heat shield that everybody is focusing in on today, a very important facet of the mission, as heat will build around the spacecraft to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit during that peak heating point when we enter the Earth's atmosphere. We are on a free return trajectory, so there's no turning back as the Earth looms large in the field of view already and will only get larger with each passing minute. So once again, we're standing by to wake the crew up for its final hours in space as they head home for a splashdown in the Pacific later this evening. Crew wake-up schedule just 22 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston. This is Mission Control Houston. Here in the Artemis Flight Control Room, we are just a few minutes away from waking the crew up. Commander Reid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen. The countdown clocks here in Mission Control ticking backward toward the splashdown and the return home of these 4 crew members just 8 hours and 38 minutes from now. We're preparing to wake the crew up in about 6 minutes for their final hours on the Orion spacecraft they have named Integrity. You will be hearing a lot more about Integrity. We'll be identifying the key voices you will be hearing, and we're going to run down all of the specifics of timeline, heat shield, comparisons between Artemis I and Artemis II as the morning moves into the afternoon hours. So stay tuned. We are preparing to wake the crew up in about 6 minutes with our final wake-up call of the mission. This is Mission Control Houston.
Good morning, Reid, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy. Zach from Zach Brown Band here, checking in from the USA. We hope that piece of our song, Free, helps start your day with the right kind of lift. We just want to say how proud we are of you. It takes courage, grit, and freedom to chase the unknown. It's the purest kind of American spirit. Millions back home are looking up and feeling more inspired because of you. Keep flying strong, keep flying safe. We can't wait to welcome you home. Come see us on the road.
This is Mission Control Houston, a pair of wake-up songs to mark the
start the day, Houston. Courage and grit. That'll stick with me, and it should stick with all of you all day long.
We got it loud and clear, Integrity. Can't wait to see you run to the water. See you soon. Good morning.
And with that, Integrity's astronauts are awake for their final hours in space. The wake-up songs you just heard were played for the crew, and the first was Run to the Water by Live. This was the Integrity crew's selection for their final wake-up song of the mission, followed by the song Free by the Zach Brown Band, and a personal message to the crew from Zach Brown himself. Reid Wiseman responded to that. And here in Mission Control, spacecraft communicator Tess Caswell responded in kind as she is preparing, along with the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers, to begin a shift handover to the entry team. This view from a solar array wing camera on Integrity, showing the Earth growing larger and larger in the field of view. Now just 8 hours and 27 minutes until splashdown. Once again, shift handover is about to begin as the entry team of flight controllers, led by Flight Director Rick Henfling, will take over for the remainder of this flight. With the crew now having been awakened, they'll have an opportunity to get a morning meal, review their messages, send down any questions they have about their procedures, which were extensively reviewed yesterday, and complete the configuration of the crew cabin, stowing final items and preparing their flight data files and their personal computing devices with all of their entry procedures on those tablets. The next major event is going to be the RTC-3 burn. That's the return trajectory correction burn number 3. That is the final major maneuver of this mission. That is scheduled to be an 8-second firing of the reaction control system thrusters to change the velocity of Integrity by 4.2 feet per second and further fine-tune the angle of attack and the trajectory of Integrity to hit the sweet spot in the entry corridor over the Pacific Ocean for entry interface later today. The RTC-3 burn is scheduled at 1:53 p.m. Central Time, just 3 hours and 10 minutes from now. Integrity systems are in good shape, ready to support entry and splashdown. The weather at the splashdown site southwest of San Diego is excellent. The latest forecast from the Spaceflight Meteorology Group indicates that the densest portion of cloud cover will be closer to the San Diego shoreline and not exactly in the splashdown zone itself. We are expecting some broken and scattered clouds. Winds should be around 10 knots, wave heights less than 4 feet, with the wave periodics about 17 seconds in duration. This is just about ideal conditions in the Pacific at this time of year for the homecoming of Integrity's astronauts. This is Mission Control Houston at a mission elapsed time of 8 days, 17 hours, 51 minutes into the flight of Integrity on the Artemis II mission. The astronauts were awakened aboard Integrity about an hour ago. They're in their post-sleep period, reviewing morning messages, getting a bite to eat, completing the stowage of items in their crew cabin. As everything is all set, the stage is set for their return to Earth this evening with a splashdown of the Pacific off the coast of San Diego 7 hours and 40 minutes from now. Here in the flight control room, known as the White Flight Control Room, a shift handover has been completed. The entry team of flight controllers now on duty, led by Flight Director Rick Henfling. Henfling has trained with this team for more than 2 years for this day. He will be joined on console by spacecraft communicator Jackie Mahaffey. Astronaut Stan Love also will be by her side as a second set of eyes as Integrity barrels home, completing a mission that will have spanned 694,481 miles from launch to splashdown. In the shift handover, no significant issues were reported. The vehicle is in great shape, and the weather at the splashdown zone couldn't be better. Winds are forecast to be 10 knots at splashdown, wave heights less than 4 feet, and the wave periodics against the capsule as it bobs in the Pacific Ocean about 17 seconds. We are expecting a few broken and scattered clouds, but that is not an issue. Integrity is coming home through the law of orbital mechanics. The next major milestone for Integrity's astronauts and the flight control team here in Houston will be the RTC-3 burn. That is the return trajectory correction number 3 burn. That is scheduled 2 hours and 25 minutes from now at 1:53 p.m. Central Time. It's an 8-second firing of the reaction control system jets to essentially fine-tune the path of Integrity down the corridor for its entry into the Earth's atmosphere. There will be a change in velocity of 4.2 feet per second. That is the last major maneuver of the mission. The crew will continue to configure the crew cabin. They'll climb into their launch and entry suits later today and move into their entry checklist. So this is a good time for us to run down all of the key milestones and all of the key numbers that you'll be hearing reported as we move into the final phase of this 9-day mission. Following the RTC-3 burn and the crew climbing into their launch and entry suits, we will have NASA Plus coverage joining in a simulcast of our 24/7 YouTube coverage at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. At 6:15 p.m., Integrity will switch communications loops and the strings for communication from the Deep Space Network, which it has been on since the translunar injection burn the day after launch. We will transition from the Deep Space Network to the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. At 6:33 p.m., the crew module and its 4 astronauts will separate from the European Service Module. And at 6:37 p.m. Central Time, these are all Central Time, we will conduct about a 19-second raise burn. Now, if you think of yourself sitting in a recliner and tilting backward, this raise burn gently raises the aft end of the vehicle. It is our last opportunity to dial in a flight path angle before entry interface using the roll thrusters on the crew module. This will sweeten the angle of attack, if you will, the orientation of the vehicle as it enters the Earth's atmosphere, with the idea in mind of reducing any excessive heat stress on the heat shield in this deliberate opportunity that we have selected to try to mitigate any buildup of excessive heat on the aft end of the vehicle. Once the raise burn is complete, we will enter the first traces of Earth's atmosphere at 6:53 and 31 seconds p.m. Central Time. At that point, we'll be at an altitude of 400,000 feet, traveling 34,882 feet per second, with a range to splashdown of 1,701 nautical miles. Just 24 seconds after entry interface, traveling at that velocity, we will begin a 6-minute blackout period due to the ionization, the buildup of plasma around the spacecraft that will prevent communications and data from being received here in Mission Control. Again, that blackout scheduled to begin at 6:53 and 55 seconds p.m. Central Time, about a 6-minute blackout. We'll be carefully monitoring a call from Capcom to the crew as we exit the blackout. That will be our first communications with the crew following that 6-minute period. The blackout scheduled to end right around 7 p.m. straight up. That's Central Time. That'll be 6 minutes and 25 seconds after the start of entry interface. At that point, we will be at an altitude of 157,406 feet off the Earth, traveling at 13,342 feet per second. Range to splashdown at that point will be just 147 nautical miles. There will be a series of roll reversals, rolling, this is computer commanded, to roll the vehicle to the left and back to the right to bleed off excess energy, all part of the planned entry profile for Integrity and its 4 astronauts. We are expected to go subsonic, meaning we will break the sound barrier over the Pacific in this trajectory that will carry us from southwest and northeast across the Pacific Ocean. We will go subsonic at 7:02 and 25 seconds p.m. Central Time at an altitude of 59,000 feet, traveling just 971 feet per second. So you can see how much the velocity of Integrity will decelerate based on its speed and the interaction with the Earth's friction in the atmosphere. At that point, a series of parachutes will begin to deploy. The first deployment will be the forward bay cover chutes. These are a series of 3 parachutes, each parachute approximately 100 feet long. The first forward bay cover parachute deployment will occur at an altitude of 24,000 feet. As the spacecraft has descended to a velocity of just 479 feet per second, and we will be within a mile, 1 nautical mile of splashdown at that point. In rapid fire succession then, we'll deploy 2 drogue parachutes used to slow and stabilize the crew module during descent to establish the proper conditions for main parachute deployment that will follow. A trio of pilot parachutes then deploy. They'll be used to lift and deploy the main parachutes from the forward bay of the crew module. That's the top portion of the crew module. And finally, 3 large main parachutes will deploy. The main chutes are scheduled to deploy at 7:04 and 44 seconds p.m. Central Time at an altitude of just 5,400 feet from splashdown. The velocity for the astronauts aboard Integrity at the time of splashdown expected to be just 19 miles an hour. So in just 13 and a half minutes from the start of entry interface to splashdown, we will have decelerated from what is expected to be a peak velocity of some 23,783 miles an hour to just 19 miles an hour for a gentle splashdown. One of the important points that we've been explaining and that we'll be looking for later today is the comparison between the entry for Artemis I, which was uncrewed, and today's entry for the Artemis II astronauts. On Artemis I, we had an entry range of 3,178 nautical miles, and we used what was called a skip entry profile, where we dipped into the atmosphere, then dipped out, and then dipped back in. That lasted about 20 minutes for entry, and it induced a higher total heat load on the vehicle. Now, on Artemis I, we flew that trajectory, and as part of the routine post-flight inspections and video analysis, there were areas of mechanical char liberation that were observed, which was not expected. As we explained yesterday, it's worth explaining again today, and we'll do later today as well. The chemical decomposition of ablative heat shields is fully expected. The mechanical liberation of the char was not expected. The chemical decomposition occurs as the heat shield material heats up and decomposes, the process called pyrolysis, which generates gases during entry. The generation rate of that gas is a function of the temperature of the heat shield material, which is known as avcoat. As the gases are being generated, a layer of char is forming on the surface of the heat shield. That char is porous. Now, ideally, what you want to have happen is for the gases to escape through the pores in the char layer faster than new gas is generated. But on Artemis I, we found that the temperature profile experienced by the heat shield and on the heat shield was such that this was not happening on areas of the heat shield with less porous avcoat. That resulted in a pressure buildup under the surface of the char layer, and when the pressure gets high enough, the portions of the char layer would liberate from the heat shield. That's what we observed. As a result of all of this, NASA gathered experts from across the agency and private industry, including establishing an independent review team to investigate this issue, and after extensive analysis, everyone agreed with the conclusion that we should plan to fly a shorter entry trajectory to avoid a temperature profile conducive to high rates of gas generation as that avcoat chemically decomposes. Now, for Artemis III and beyond, we're redesigning the heat shield, different heat shield, and redesigning the manufacturing process such that we will have material that starts out more porous and will allow a more efficient gas dissipation as that char layer forms, which will be a critical feature for a longer duration skip entry trajectories returning from the south pole of the moon. The bottom line of all of this is today, instead of a 3,178 nautical mile entry range, we're targeting a 1,701 max entry range to our splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego, 1,701 nautical miles. We're using a lofted entry profile. That's being done through the raise burn. The duration of the entry is about 14 minutes rather than 20 minutes, and that induces a much lower heat load on the heat shield to allow it to do its job to maximum efficiency. Following splashdown, which again is scheduled at 7:07:07 p.m. Central Time. That's 7:07 and 7 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time, 2.5 hours before sunset at the splashdown site. Following splashdown, we will get a call from the crew. The communications will transition to what you'll hear called VLDR. That's the acronym for Very Low Data Rate, because we no longer have the antennas pointing toward the Tracking and Data Relay satellite system at that point. Now, whether the vehicle is upright in the so-called Stable 1 configuration, or whether it's upside down in Stable 2, we will quickly activate the CMOOS system, the acronym for the Crew Module Uprighting System. The Crew Module Uprighting System consists of 5 large balloon-like airbags located under the capsule's forward bay cover. These airbags will be inflated with helium, providing additional buoyancy to flip the capsule upright if it's in Stable 2, or to maintain it in a Stable 1 configuration. Navy helicopters, Navy paradivers, a Navy flight surgeon and a NASA flight surgeon will all be on the scene and will be erecting a large raft called a front porch alongside the spacecraft. That is similar to what you've seen in the movies and in the past in historic footage from the Apollo missions. That will be utilized once the hatch is open to allow the crew members to be extracted one by one onto that front porch before they're hoisted onto a pair of hovering Navy helicopters in sequential fashion, in alternating fashion as well, for the short ride back to the deck of the recovery ship, the USS John Murtha. Now, before we get into all that, it will take about 15 minutes to power down the vehicle, and for flight controllers here in Houston and the Navy recovery team to ascertain that there are no toxic gases that are leaking from Integrity. We do not expect that to happen, but they'll put eyeballs on it to match the data that we will see here at Mission Control to ensure that the recovery team can make a safe approach to the spacecraft to begin the process of erecting the front porch. The current order of extraction from the vehicle that we received from the ship called for Christina Koch to be extracted first, followed by Victor Glover, then Jeremy Hansen, and then Reid Wiseman last. The hoisting of the crew members to these two helos, Christina Koch is scheduled to be hoisted first into helicopter number 1, or the helicopter A as it is being termed by the recovery team. Jeremy Hansen would be second to be hoisted. He'll go into helo number 2. Victor Glover will be hoisted third and will go into helo 1 to join Koch. And Reid Wiseman will be hoisted into helo 2 to join Jeremy Hansen for the ride back to the ship. The recovery position would put the ship about 2,000 yards away from the spacecraft, assuming an on-target splashdown. The small boats will be much closer so that they can be deployed in rapid fire succession to arrive at the side of Integrity to ensure that they begin the orderly process of erecting the front porch and beginning the process of opening the hatch. The John P. Murtha, the recovery ship, is expected to be about 5 miles away from the spacecraft at the time of splashdown. That will expedite the helo flight for the two helicopters back to the deck of the ship. Once on the ship, the crew will emerge from the helos and they'll be brought into the medical bay on the ship for comprehensive medical exams that will set the stage for them to be flown off the ship at a subsequent hour. We just don't know exactly what that hour will be at this point. It will depend on the condition of the crew and other factors. But once they depart the ship, they'll be flown by helicopter to the San Diego Naval Air Station to board a NASA plane to fly back to the Johnson Space Center in Houston. So that's your snapshot rundown of the activities that lie ahead. The next major activity just over 2 hours from now, that will be the RTC-3 burn, the return trajectory correction burn number 3, the final in the series of fine-tuning maneuvers to pinpoint Integrity's precise path down the middle of the corridor for entry into the Earth's atmosphere. This is Mission Control Houston. This computer-generated visualization based on real-time telemetry from Integrity showing the distance from Earth decreasing with each passing second, now just 54,000 miles from Earth, and the distance traveled by Integrity's astronauts since they arrived at the Moon earlier this week. We are currently 7 hours, 10 minutes away from Splashdown, a high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere, awaiting Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen to wrap up a mission that will have logged from launch to Splashdown 694,481 miles. That, of course, includes that high Earth orbit that carried Integrity to an altitude at apogee of about 43,000 miles above the Earth for the first 24 hours of the mission to enable flight controllers to ring out all of the systems on Integrity and collect data that gave them the confidence to give approval for the translunar injection burn that sent the crew on its way to the Moon and an historic flyby of the lunar surface. This is Mission Control Houston. 8 days, 18 hours, 39 minutes into the flight of Integrity on the Artemis II mission. Here in the flight control room, Flight Director Rick Henfling and his team of entry flight controllers on duty, joined by spacecraft communicator Jackie Mahaffey. That's the voice you'll hear talking to the crew throughout the course of the day's activities through entry and through splashdown. Aboard Integrity, the astronauts, Commander Reid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen are wrapping up their post-sleep period, having an opportunity to review their morning mail, getting a bite to eat, and getting things set up for final cabin stowage of items no longer needed on this flight prior to the time they move into their entry checklist a few hours from now. The next major milestone will be 1 hour, 38 minutes from now. That will be the firing of the reaction control system thrusters on Integrity in what is called the RTC-3 burn, the return trajectory correction number 3 burn, the final in the series of mid-course correction maneuvers to fine-tune Integrity's path so that it reaches the center of the entry corridor at the orientation we want the vehicle in, as it approaches and enters the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet later today. This will be an 8-second burn to change the velocity of Integrity by 4.2 feet per second. And again, will be the final major maneuver of this mission. After we discard the European service module, this evening at 6:33 p.m. Central Time, a few minutes later, we'll conduct a raise burn, as it is called. That is a maneuver using Integrity's thrusters, about a 19-second burn that will lift the aft end of the vehicle and provide the final angle of attack that the spacecraft will be traveling in to reach the splashdown zone some 1,701 nautical miles from the point of entry interface. In the Pacific Ocean, the USS John P. Murtha is on station, ready to begin recovery operations once Integrity has splashed down. The splashdown is scheduled at 7:07 and 7 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time, 2.5 hours before sunset. From launch to splashdown, Integrity and its 4 crew members will have traveled 694,481 miles. Communication with the crew on the voice loops will pick up considerably in the next short period of time here as we move out of the post-sleep period into the final hours of the cabin configuration, the preparations for the return trajectory correction burn, and then the crew moving into its entry checklist. All of Integrity's systems are in excellent shape. The latest weather forecast from the Spaceflight Meteorology Group here at the Johnson Space Center for the splashdown zone southwest of San Diego calls for winds at about 10 knots, wave heights less than 4 feet, wave periods, that's the periodic raise and subsidence of the waves against the spacecraft, that should be about 17 seconds in duration. Just some broken and scattered clouds expected in the splashdown area. The weather is go, the vehicle is go, and we are set for splashdown 6 hours, 48 minutes, and 50 seconds from now. This is Mission Control Houston.
Integrity Houston, good morning. Comm check, post ACU swaps.
Good morning, Houston. We got you loud and clear.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. We want to let you know that OE2 is privatized, ready to start the conference early or on time at your preference. And afterwards, we've got a couple of cabin entry config items to sync with you. Give us a call.
Okay, Jackie. How about we take those cabin config items right away, and then we'll do the PMC.
We can do that. So looking at the cabin entry config procedure, step 5 for the AGAs is no perform. Based on your battery activities last night, AGA is in good shape through splashdown. And in step 10, we would...
That tracks with our thinking.
We would like you to get going early on step 10. In particular, for the post-landing LIO, we'd like you to perform the battery check that is in step 1 of your post-landing LIO mounting and routing procedure.
Okay, we can get started on the LIO.
All right, that was all we had for you for cabin entry config for now.
Houston, speaking of cabin config, one thing for you, the contingency urine CWC, that has, we had a plan so that we could actually complete that stowage as a get-ahead last night, and that's been done. We did not use a hefty bag, but it is empty, and it is sealed in 2 Ziplocs inside the JSB. We feel that it's unaccessible now, and we'd like to keep it in that config.
All right, Christina, thanks for the status. We will confirm that is a good config.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Jackie, we'll head over to Private 2 for the PMC.
Staged out in the Pacific Ocean, just west of San Diego. We are staged about 6.5 miles from where we expect Orion to splash down.